Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Allison's Corner. Of course, I am your host, Allison. And today's episode is painfully personal, entertainingly personal. Like, I'm about to drag myself in a cute way type personal. So this episode is called Life Would Be Easier If I Just Took My Own Advice, because let's be real, we all wish we could take our own advice sometimes, and it's easier said than done. So let's just start here, right? I give excellent advice, top tier, better than therapists, better than the aunties, better than the YouTube girlies, better than Google. But when the moment comes for me to take that same advice, y'all, I can't even lie, I suddenly lose all of my memory of ever saying anything. I become very delusional, I become hopeful, and I become, but maybe, I'll see it out for myself. And I'm like, girl, why are you like this? Why are we like this? Because don't play. I know that you do it too. So today we're talking about why we're great advice givers, but are terrible with execution, why we know better, but we don't be doing better, and why we stay in situations we've outgrown. You know, why sometimes when our intuition speaks very clearly, we still are like, oh, I need to double check. And how can we start taking our own advice without letting fear, feelings, or our own fantasy just run the show? So, today is going to be a little funny, a little honest, and it's probably going to hurt just a little, but go ahead, grab your drink. I'm drinking my Olipop. Shout out to them. They're not advertising or sponsoring, but they will one day. Go ahead and grab whatever comfort drink you want to have on hand, and we're going to get into today's episode. All right, so let's get into the classics, the quotes that I throw around very confidently, but I don't practice consistently, right? So, number one, the one quote that I say all the time is stop settling for jobs that don't value you. And listen, I love telling people to leave their job. I will tell them, you're too skilled for that. You deserve more. Stop letting them use you. But me, I have definitely stayed in jobs that drained my energy, that stole my peace of mind, and made me question my entire purpose. You know, you guys just heard our last episode that I talked about being laid off. I was sitting at that job annoyed every day, but still somehow convincing myself, maybe the tension would go away, or they're going to go ahead and give me a raise, or I just need to push through. But what am I pushing through? A wall, a burning building, a toxic workplace. But then I'll hype somebody else up and I'll be like, go ahead, take that leap, apply for, that new role. But my own LinkedIn is dry because I was too tired to apply. Like, girl, be for real. Number two, another one that I tend to say a lot of the time is set boundaries and protect your peace. I tell everyone to set boundaries, family, friends, partners, coworkers, strangers. But when it comes to my own boundaries, y'all, I'm not even gonna lie, I fold, okay? I'll set a rule in my head that says, like don't let anyone call after 9 p.m. And then 9:07 rolls around and someone calls and I'm over here picking up like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" And what happens when I'm tested in that moment? Suddenly, I'm giving people a second chance and I'm creating a PowerPoint explaining my feelings. And the problem is, I know my boundaries. I admittedly just don't always commit to them. Number three, don't ignore red flags. Listen, I can spot red flags in someone else's life a mile away. But my red flags, I will decorate them. I will frame them. I'll say they're maroon, burgundy, rust, anything but red. Like a job that's very disorganized, I'll just be like, oh, it's a learning phase. Or a friend that shows a little bit of jealousy, I'll say, oh, maybe she didn't mean it. But no, she meant it, or he meant it, that workplace meant it. But we love pretending that we didn't see it. Another thing that I say all the time is choose yourself first. I give this advice like it's scripture, but me, I'll choose peace for everyone else before I give peace for me. And someone else, they can inconvenience me 10 times before I say, okay, let me protect my energy. A friend can ask me for the world, and I'll be like, yeah, sure, even if my own cup is completely empty. Someone can treat me less than I deserve, and I'll be like, oh, it's just not that bad. But for other people, I'm like, girl, choose you. Don't choose them. You matter. Stop pouring from an empty cup. And that is so ridiculous for me to say when my own cup is bone dry. Okay, so let's talk about the actual psychology behind this. So we're going to get a little bit deeper. Number one, emotional attachment can cloud our judgment. So when it's your situation, feelings get involved. You have so many feelings. You have hope, you have fear, you have loneliness, you have comfort. There might be history between you and another person. There's so many what ifs in a situation. Again, the fantasy that you make up in your mind. But if we're being realistic, these things blur your logic. And when you're advising someone else, you are detached from the situation because you're able to see everything clearly than you would in your own life. And that also brings me to point number two. We want the outcome without the discomfort. So we want the new job without the stress of applying and interviewing, right? We want the right, partner in our lives without letting go sometimes of the wrong one. We want to set boundaries with people, but we also don't want confrontation. We want to grow, but we don't want inconvenience. And as humans, in a way, we are wired for comfort, but advice requires change, and change also requires discomfort. Another thing as to why we might be like this is because we think that our situation is special. We tend to believe we're the exception to the rule. So we'll give someone advice confidently and then turn around and say, oh, but my situation is different. And I know we have all been there, but the truth is, it really isn't. You're just more attached to that situation because it's yours. Another reason why is because we don't want to admit that we're scared. A lot of not taking our own advice comes down to fear. And fear shows up in a plethora of ways. You have the fear of being alone, the fear of failing, the fear of starting over. You have the fear of missing out. You fear being uncomfortable. And you also fear just the unknown of what you don't know what will happen next. And sometimes fear can make us rationalize our nonsense in a way. Another reason could be knowing better doesn't automatically translate into doing better. And this is a very key point because wisdom and discipline are not the same thing. You know, you can be the smartest person in the room and still sabotage yourself. I can know all the right steps and still stay stuck in place. And the thing is, when it comes to growth, it requires both. It requires wisdom and discipline. You need to know better and you need to be uncomfortable enough to do the work consistently. Now, I got some stories for you guys. So go ahead and grab your tea as to, while you're listening. And while you're listening to these stories, I want you to reflect because of course, I'm dragging myself a little bit, but I want to show you why we act the way that we do and how we can get better or how I've gotten better moving forward. So, this first story that I want to tell you about is about the man who showed me who he was on day number one. Okay. So listen, there was a situation where the guy, he had shown me who he was from the beginning. He was super inconsistent when it came to texting. He didn't plan anything. If he did text, it was very dry. I was the one that always initiated the conversations or planned the dates. And also, he was very emotionally immature. Now, granted, I was in my 20s when all of this was happening, so I kind of give myself a little bit of grace, right? But at the end of the day, I saw all of that very clearly. And I even said one day to my friend, I said, I don't think that he's serious. But then I proceeded to entertain this man for even longer because why not? Why be logical when you can be delusional? And I'll be honest, the day I finally snapped out of it, I looked at myself like, you knew better. You said all of the right advice, but you just didn't listen. Even another story that I have about, a job where I waited too long to leave. There was a job that I stayed in, even though every day literally felt like punishment. It was my very first job out of college. I was overwhelmed. I was underpaid. I was underappreciated. And I was very overworked. And I kept complaining. I kept saying, one day I'll leave soon. I just need to hold on a little longer. This is my first job. I don't know what to expect. And yes, the experience, was something that I needed for my resume, but that holding on a little bit longer part turned into months. And meanwhile, I was telling other people to leave their jobs at the first sign of disrespect. That didn't make any sense, y'all. I mean, I have another story about a friendship that I outgrew, but I tried to force. There was a friend who I kept giving the benefit of the doubt to. I ignored the subtle comments, the jealousy, how they put in a lack of effort. There was always this imbalance between us and sometimes this weird energy. And I felt like she was sometimes shading me. And there was also a sense of selfishness. And I saw it all, but I kept hoping it would go back to how it used to be. But it never did. And instead of walking away when I first saw the signs, I tried to fix it alone, but she did nothing. And that's when I learned I had to stop over investing where I'm already underappreciated. I mean, I have stories for days where there were times that I ignored my intuition. You know, there are so many times where my intuition has spoken very, very clearly. Just like this person doesn't mean well, this job isn't right, this guy isn't for you, this situation isn't aligned. But instead of listening, I said, oh, let me get more proof. Y'all, why? Why do we need proof when our intuition is screaming and going off in our heads? It's like I'd rather suffer than trust myself. And that's something I need to work on because that can't continue to happen. Now, with all of that, this is where growth does come in, and here is what I'm committed to doing from now on. Number 1 is responding slowly, not impulsively. Every message doesn't need a reply. Every situation doesn't need a reaction, and not every request needs a yes. And I'm learning in these moments to pause first and then answer later. And this alone has helped to change how I view things a little bit more. I'm also learning to listen to red flags the first time and to stop doubting myself, saying, oh, I'm overthinking, or let me see how it plays out. If I feel it, I need to trust it. If I see it, I need to address it. And if it continues to repeat, then I need to leave. I also have been growing in not forcing connections. With friendship, it should flow. It shouldn't feel like work. Connections are hard work, but it shouldn't be so hard where it feels very one sided. And that goes for, my relationships as far as dating, the same with my community, and the same when it comes to my family. Because if I'm the only one that's trying, that's not fair. And I don't always want to be the only one trying. I saw a TikTok video where this young lady, and I can't remember the name of the creator, but she said, "You are too old to not have discipline." And when I tell you that video, I saw it last week, has been stuck in my mind, it's so true. And one of the ways in which I want to grow moving forward is to follow through on the goals that I set for myself. So, not the goals that people expect from me, not goals for aesthetics, but the real goals that I want. If I'm saying that I want a new job, I should be applying for it. If I'm saying that I want to create consistent content, I need to be doing that. If I say I'm cutting off certain habits, they need to be done. This is how I begin to see self respect in action, and that I can continue to do this moving forward. Also, just choosing myself first, not after everyone else gets their needs met, not when I'm drained, not when it's inconvenient, but first. And I'm not gonna lie, this is very new for me and I'm working on it, but it does feel good to kind of put that energy into myself that I didn't put beforehand. And here's the truth: life really would be easier if we took our own advice, right? But at the end of the day, we're human and we're emotional and we get attached and we want things to work out. We want to see the good in others and we want to avoid discomfort. But the more we ignore ourselves, the further we get from the life that we actually want. This week, choose one piece of your own advice and act on it. Just one, and you'll be surprised how powerful that one decision can be. Of course, before I let y'all go, I'm going to leave you with a quote, and it says, sometimes you have to take your own advice and apply it to your own problems. As always, y'all, God bless. Have an amazing day. And thank you for listening to Allison's Corner.